Welcome to the ripple effect of love for dads and families. Today, in episode 77, I have a special guest handling big emotions, yours or theirs. I'm Christine Bernard, stress management coach, and much more. And I'm excited to have a dad join us. And welcome to Christian Craig, no, Craig Yee, sorry, used to the other dad hopping on. That's called Christian. So I just messed everything up. Trying to multitask doesn't always work very well for me. So welcome, Craig. It's so nice to have you, father of two with beautiful girls, ages 10 and 8. You're also a spiritual life coach who shares his personal experience learning from lessons, right? We've got tips, tricks, tools, and practices that have helped build up his children's emotional wellness, emotional intelligence, and really as resilience so that they can handle their emotions in positive ways. And without further ado, hello, Craig. How are you today?
I am very well, Christine. How are you doing?
Good, good, good. A little bit like, woo, lots to do. So I'm going to start with the snap, tap, and zap. Just to calm down my whole amygdala, who's going a little bit crazy. I don't know why, but sometimes there's unconscious fears that come up, right?
Absolutely.
And oh yeah, I was running around getting fixing something. That's what it was. Oh, okay. So now that I'm calmer, we can have an amazing time together. And today you will learn from Craig the important role of dads in building emotional resilience in their children. Ooh, would love to hear more about that, Craig.
Well, thank you very much, Christine. This topic is near and dear to my heart because I started learning about my own emotional intelligence, or really lack thereof, in the
Mm.
1990s. And a very transformative book that I read that you've probably heard of is by Daniel Goleman, right? Emotional intelligence. And that's when I started to learn about the importance of
Mm.
EQ, um, in addition to IQ, right? There's been a
Yes.
focus a lot on the emotional quotient, but not too much on intelligence quotient, but not too much on the emotional quotient. And what I realized from reading that book was that I had a lot of pent up emotions that weren't really processed or
Mm.
healed very well. And so I set out on a path to address those things so that one day, when I became a
Mm.
father, which I am now, I would be able to pass on what I've learned about myself, my personal experiences, my lessons, and my tips and tricks to my own children to help them manage their own emotions, especially in today's landscape. You know,
Yes. Yes. And that's a beautiful journey. If all dads or dads to be were following the ripple effect of love for dads or doing this inner work to develop their emotional quotient, wow, the world would just change so much. It'd be so amazing to see. So that's really, really exciting. And do you want to share why frustration builds up and how to diffuse it before it explodes?
well, absolutely. I mean, we all get frustrated throughout the day. Things don't go the way we plan. So sometimes the frustration actually starts with us. And then we pick up our kids from school and they're excited, they're energetic, we're tired, they're going at 100 miles an hour. They may fight. My kids fight sometimes a lot, and conflict ensues. And then our frustration sometimes passes on to their frustration. Or maybe we pick our kids up from school and something happened at school. There's a conflict or a problem or an issue with a teacher or a peer, a classmate, and they're frustrated and things.
Mhm.
So there's nothing wrong with having a feeling. There's nothing wrong with feeling frustration or irritation or anger even. It's what we do with it that can be the problem, right? And how we deal with that frustration. if we don't address that frustration right away, you
Yes.
know, we don't take a moment to stop, pause, and breathe and just get ourselves recentered. You have the
Mm.
snap, or
Yep.
snap, sorry,
Snap,
snap,
tap,
tap,
zap. Yeah,
tap
that's okay.
technique. I use
Yep.
stop, pause and breathe, and then take
Can
a
you
few
show us
breaths.
how you do that so that if some dads would like to try that out, they can?
Absolutely. Well, it first starts with me being in tune with my own emotions. And normally, what I feel is a little bit scrambled up inside. I'm feeling tense and I'm not feeling grounded and centered. And my mind is just going, whoo, like this. And so when I become aware of that, I just literally stop if I'm safe, right? And sometimes
Yeah.
this happens while I'm driving. I'm at a stoplight. I will just take a moment, close my eyes for a few seconds, pause, and then do 3 conscious breaths, which is what I learned from Eckhart Tolle. Deep
Mm.
breathing in and out of my mouth only. So just like this. And even that, I actually feel
Mhm.
much less tension in my body. My shoulders have dropped. Sometimes I put my hand on my heart.
Mm.
So really what it comes down to is both techniques are helping us get grounded and centered back into the mindful moment and getting out of our heads and more into our hearts.
Yeah.
My daughter was going a little bit nuts yesterday, and she was going a million miles a minute, and I couldn't even understand what she was saying. I
Mm.
said, Cassie, please just take a moment. Let's just take a moment and breathe. And we breathe. I breathe with her, right?
Oh,
It's
I
not that she,
love that. That is so, so important. You're asking her to do it and you're doing it with her. So what best how can you can't offer better support than that to your children, can you?
well, no, it's what we were, my kids, I'm not afraid to say that my kids saw a child psychologist for various reasons.
Yeah.
And, one of the key things is reflection and mirroring and things
Mm,
like that. I'm not better than my kid, but
yeah.
we cannot expect our kids at their age to just automatically know how to regulate their emotions. We have to, what I've heard from our child psychologists and understand, help
Yeah.
them co-regulate
Yes.
emotions at the
Yes.
same time as not regulating it for them.
Yes.
So part of the
I
co-regulation is reflection and mirroring.
I love that distinction. I don't think I've ever made it on the live here, but it's really you want them to learn to do it. So you're not doing it for them. You're not just the one doing it. They're not just the one doing it, but you're both doing it. So you're both co-regulating. You're both calming down that, crazy mode that you were in. That is so beautiful. I love that.
Oh, and I also need it myself, right?
Yes,
Because,
exactly.
if my child
Mhm.
is amped up,
Yes.
I'm empathic, I'm an empath. I also get amped up too. I can feel
Yes.
it, right?
Yes.
So yes, I'm leading by example. I'm also showing them that I'm not better or superior than
Yes.
they are. I
Yes.
also need it myself just to
Yes.
bring myself back to the mindful present.
And that is so, so key, for dads who are just starting this journey and or grandparents that have never been raised to do this. It's so important to do it for us. Often I've met many parents who chose not to work with me because they wanted to fix their kid and only their kid. And I can teach your child some strategies, but you need to be part of the solution because you're most likely the biggest part of the problem. And it's hard for parents to understand this because that's not the way we're raised. That's not our belief system. That's not, how what we believe in this society.
Well, and it's very much also a cultural thing in my culture, right? The Chinese
Mhm.
culture, where the parent is here and the
Yeah.
child is down here. I don't know where I learned this from, whether I read it or someone told it to me, but naturally, intuitively, when I talk to any child, and it doesn't necessarily have to be my own, I actually bend down and I
Mm.
lower myself physically, right, to their
Mhm.
level. right? Be it on my knees, or I'm squatting, or whatever have you, or I'm bent over, because I want to let that kid know I'm not above you, right?
Yes. And our tone of voice will say a lot as well.
Oh, absolutely, right? I mean, it's hard to manage our own voices sometimes, because
Mhm.
there is a natural inclination for me to be like my mother, right? That's where I got programmed to be a parent,
Okay.
to yell, scream, and things like that. And I'm not perfect, so there's many moments where I've yelled and screamed and swore and things like that. But then I also have the wherewithal to apologize to my kids.
Yes.
So a
Yeah.
big part of building up EI in our kids is actually building up our own EI.
Yes, because if we don't have it
You
and
can't teach
our kids learn intrinsically from us, you know,
you
we're
can't you can't teach what you don't know,
exactly. You
right?
can talk about it but if you're not implementing it and living it, your kids will be very confused about this duality happening. Says this, but doing that. What's the reality here? Where do I go with this? And often when you talk, they're just not going to respect the words that you want to share with them. They're going to say, "Yeah, right," and look at what you're doing, right?
Well, that's how a lot of us were raised, right? Do as
Yeah,
I say, not as I do,
yeah.
right? Which is
Unfortunately,
definition of hypocrisy, right?
yes.
But
Yes.
going back to us becoming more of our emotions, you know, is something that we talked about prior to setting up this episode, which is
Mhm.
our children are teaching us, right? They are sometimes our greatest teachers, right?
They are. They are, and they mirror us. So I was working with a client earlier today, and it was very interesting how the client was saying how the children bicker.
Mm.
And so there's this, energy between them that's like, well, hold and behold, her inner child and her self had that energy, right? Because you've got to be positive, you've got to, go, 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 and keep this positive mindset. However, if there's a part of you that is hurting inside, it needs to come up. So until the client's able to allow that and give it lots of love and to that part, there's always this tension happening, and the children are teaching this client exactly that.
Well, and it's also listening to ourselves. So, I've heard
Yes.
A Rumi quote once. The Sufi mystic and poet. These
Mhm.
pains you feel are messengers. Listen to them. And he
Yes.
wasn't referring to physical pains. He was referring to the pains that we feel when it comes to our feelings, which create our own kind of suffering. So if we're
Mhm.
not ourselves doing, like you said, the inner work,
Mhm.
addressing our own hurt inner child,
Yeah,
then we're speaking from that place, not the place of the loving, compassionate, kind, gentle parent.
exactly.
So hurt
Exactly.
is matching hurt versus
Exactly.
love, embracing and welcoming and holding and protecting and keeping safe hurt, right? Because
Yes.
that's all it comes down to, right?
Mhm.
And a big part of it too is, I don't think a lot of people give themselves permission to feel. I was taught
Yeah.
that being sad means you're weak.
Mm.
Being angry means you're a bad person,
Yeah.
right? The only emotions I was allowed to feel were positive emotions. And even then, if I was happy and joyful, right, I was always kind of brought down. You can't be too happy and too joyful, right? There's something wrong with you, you know?
Yeah.
So if we can give ourselves permission to feel as parents, as dads, then we can then give our children permission to feel and allow them to have their feelings without making them wrong, without labeling it as bad, without
Yes.
judging them or criticizing them. In the beginning, it was hard because my kids didn't want to open up to me. They were afraid that I would be angry if they were
Mhm.
emotional or upset. And I said,
Mhm.
no, we have essentially an open door policy. You can tell me anything and everything, and I will do my very best not to judge or criticize you. And
Beautiful.
it's taken years, right? This is not
Yeah.
a sprint. This is definitely a marathon. But after a few years of this, my kids now just tell me everything,
Mm.
no matter.
Beautiful, right? And it's really about just being there for them and allowing um, ourselves to have lots of grace with ourselves and with our children, and they need to feel that they can come for any reason. You know, your children are 10 and 8. The oldest is getting into the tween age.
I don't need a reminder about that. I'm asking lots of other parents with teenagers or tweens to say, what are you doing? How are you managing this? But
Yeah,
for those dads and parents in general whose kids are, younger and not yet teens, I've learned that if I don't start helping my kids build up their EI and their emotional resiliency now, to
yeah.
give them the tips and tricks and the tools and practices now so that they can do it on their own eventually,
Hmm.
almost by teenage years, it's a little bit too late. It's a little bit too late.
It will be more challenging.
It definitely is more challenging.
Yeah, it
So
is for
I'm a
sure.
fan of making the road a little bit smoother and less bumpy. It's like my
I,
video that I posted on this, right? That I saw on a coaster at my friend's house.
mhm.
Prepare the child for the path, not the path for the child.
Mm, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful. And accompanying our children on the path, right? That they're going in, and it's not always easy. So, how do you turn those tough moments into teaching moments for your kids?
Well, the first part of it starts with me, right? It always starts with me,
Yep.
right? As the parent, as the one who is supposed to be a little bit more savvy and sophisticated with my way of dealing with things. And part of that is becoming open and compassionately curious to exploring my children's feelings, right? So if I can see on their face that they're not happy, they're not bouncing around, they've got their brows are furrowed, or they're expressing themselves and letting me know what's going on, I become absolutely curious and just say, okay, tell me what's going on. And then I literally just shut up and let them go. Whatever they want to say, just that's it.
And that is key. That is key. Be quiet. And if you need to count in your head to 10, 20, 100, so that you're not interrupting them, not filling up. I have a tendency to want to say the sentence for the other person. It's like, whoa, girl,
Absolutely.
be quiet. And I will self regulate and do the snap, tap, zap so that I stay quiet with my, I'm lucky. Well, I'm lucky. My kids weren't lucky because I didn't know all these tools um, when they were growing up. But now they're lucky because I know these tools, right? And my daughter has been through many challenging things, and I think she's told me most of them by now. But what I can say about the teen years is that the day that she complained about the green basket being in the wrong room, that hers was the white basket, and having a temper tantrum about that as a teen, if had I known what I know today, had I self-regulated, I am certain the events that happened afterwards would have been so much different. I could have been there listening attentively instead of taking it as an insult or an assault that my 16-year-old was like, you know,
Yes.
dumping her frustration on me. But she had seen that, right? And and my son had seen that, so he would do that. And unfortunately, sometimes in the couple, things are not always harmonious, and the children learn from what they see.
Ab-
And it was very challenging for me to stand up and say no because I had never done that with their dad.
mhm.
And So they felt they had permission to do this, and they felt it was the best way to get rid of these emotions that they didn't know what to do with, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely, right? I mean, it's partly what I'm referring to is putting on a compassionate investigator hat on. You know,
Yes.
being like Inspector Gadget or something like that, or Inspector Clouseau or Sherlock Holmes. And by becoming that investigator, we then start asking questions, right? I've had the benefit of going to university and being in science and doing research, right? Setting a
Mm,
hypothesis and then doing a study and asking questions. I've also had the benefit of being an investigator for the government in safety. And so, one thing I've learned, and I actually learned it quite early on in my life, is ask why until you can't ask why anymore.
yes.
And then there's your answer and solution.
Yes.
So I don't stop asking why until I get down to the bottom of whatever is causing that conflict or upsetness in my children,
Mm,
right? Because more oftentimes than not, what I thought or assumed was the problem
yeah.
actually wasn't the actual issue.
That is super, super important. That's exactly it. I mean, the incident with my daughter as a teen who, with the basket had absolutely nothing to do with it. There were other horrible things that had happened to her that she didn't feel comfortable sharing. She was afraid, and it never came out till she was like in her early 20s.
Well,
And
absolutely. You can't teach anything or guide your kids in anything if you don't create, along that lines, a safe,
yeah,
secure, protective environment where the child feels that it's okay for them to speak up and say things,
yeah.
right? One of the things that I heard when I was a kid is, I don't have time to talk to you about your feelings.
Mm,
I'm busy.
yeah,
And so, in a way, that is inadvertently, right? And without ill intention,
no,
um, denying, suppressing, oppressing, and repressing my feelings and my voice. So I
yeah,
never felt safe to
yeah.
express myself. And it affected me for over 40 years.
I
Over
hear you.
years. That's 40.
It affected me for way more than 40 years.
That's a long time. So I might be giving away my age to your audience here, but it took me that long and then some to
Yeah.
learn how to give myself permission to feel, how to actually make it a safe environment.
Yeah.
So one of the best ways that I've been able to help my kids is we've started journaling late
Mm,
last year. They're old enough now to journal. So we journal about gratitude and what they're grateful for on a daily basis. But we also journal about our feelings. What happened today? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling upset or angry? What's going on? And if they don't feel necessarily safe, which I did not, expressing myself, I would feel safe doing it in that container, just writing out my thoughts. Now, that being
mm,
said, I've used other tips and tricks like feelings in a bag or feelings in a box, where
mm.
I take out 4 or 5 simple feelings, write them down on little cards, and we
Yeah.
put them in a bag or box and we pick one out and play some games, almost make it fun to talk about our feelings. Sometimes, there's actually a feelings chart behind me, but you can't see it with the background, where we walk to the chart and say, okay, what are you feeling right now?
Yes.
Things like that.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That's really beautiful because you're giving them many different ways to connect to the feelings and to allow these feelings, right? Um, with the Snap Tap Zap, I usually put it on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 out of 10, hardly feel it, and 10 out of 10, how intense is your emotion? And
Yes.
sometimes people will say 12 out of 10, 20 out of 10. And some people's response would be, whoa, it's impossible. You can't go to, but yes, that means there's trauma behind it.
Absolutely.
It's so intense that there's trauma. So we need to look at the trauma as well. And yeah, creating that safe environment, we can ask our children as well, how would you feel safe to tell me that you had a cigarette with your friends, for example, and but I think it's beautiful that you have created this because your teens are going into the teenage years and they're able to have all these beautiful emotional conversations about, or these conversations about emotions. I remember working with a client, relationship with a daughter was who was only 11, was like disconnected, and we worked a few sessions with the daughter, but most of them with the parent. And what happened? They're back connected. So
Beautiful.
if you, and that's why, if you can continue, I believe anyway, that if you continue the road you're on, Craig, like, wow, your daughters are super lucky to have a dad like you who's
Thank you.
willing to do the inner work, right? And understands like a high IQ, but also a high EQ, which is, which makes that balance.
Well, I say to my friends, I'm also blessed. They say, oh, your kids are lucky or blessed. But I say that I'm also blessed to have my kids because they've helped me to
Yes.
build and refine my level of empathy and compassion and understanding and kindness and gentleness, right? That's how I've become more attuned to their emotional needs because all I've done is just put myself in their shoes and reminded myself what it felt like to hear these things or know these things when I was a child. Children are to be seen and not heard. Do not
Hmm.
speak until spoken to. You have
Hmm.
nothing to say, and you're lower than me. I know everything. I am right, even though I'm wrong. And that doesn't really serve a child's emotional or even mental needs,
No.
right? And we look at now today's landscape with social media and the
Mm.
mental and emotional health crisis that many, many, many researchers are pointing to. It's very,
Yeah.
very obvious. Articles coming out, limit screen time, things like that. And our kids' inabilities to handle any kind of conflict, even if it's small, right? So if we can set our kids up well, invariably life's challenges are going to happen. There's going to be some hardship and there's going to be some adversity. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what form it's going to take. I don't know when it's going to happen or how, but I know it's going to happen. And if we can give, if I can give my kids those tools and practices that I've learned only in the last, you know, 10, 20 years,
Mhm.
but then now they're learning it at 10 and 8, then they're going to be able to handle those situations with dignity,
Yes.
with grace,
Yes.
with respect, and
Yeah.
be also accepting and loving and tolerant of themselves and
Yes.
others.
Yes. And the beauty of it all is that you are able to see what your children are teaching you.
Yes, absolutely.
So you're learning from them and they're learning from you. So it's like a co-venture.
It's actually a co-learning
Yes.
situation, right? And
Yeah.
that requires me to be a little bit more humble, you know,
Yes.
humility in that I don't know everything as a parent or even
Mhm.
a human being. And sometimes I don't know better than my kids. In fact, actually, a lot of the times my kids have pointed things out.
Yeah.
I've gone to my own journaling and asked myself one question: what am I learning from this?
Yes.
What are my kids trying to teach me? Whether they know it or not that they're teaching me, what are my kids trying to teach me?
Yes, because they are consistently, I believe that today's children, their role is to teach us. And we need to be listening super attentively to what those lessons are because they have this inner wisdom. And as a kid, they're connected to their truth, to, you know, what I loved the most when I was teaching was that, especially in the elementary school level, kids are honest and they tell it to you like it is. Some kids are more honest than others, but they would just say it. And then they'd go, oh, I would, no, no, no. I want you to say it to me. maybe just change the tone next time because
Yeah.
sometimes it would come out because they were afraid. And it's okay. No, no, just change the tone. I agree. Let me think about that. Sometimes we need to think and we need to look at, oh, really? You're feeling that way. Well, that was my intention. How can we co-create something that works for everybody here involved in this situation?
Well, I think that's an important point because, it's not, we talked about compassionate curiosity and openness and even being vulnerable, but we didn't talk about honesty. And if
Mm,
and if I cannot be honest with myself and my feelings, then how would I expect my kids to be honest with themselves and
great.
their feelings? Right? Honesty is really, really important because if I lie about my feelings, you know how you can tell, right? Like
Yeah.
sometimes you'll ask a friend, "Hey, how's it going?" And they're like, "Oh, everything is great and fine," but in their eyes, you know that you can see a lot of pain, and you're like, "Are you sure you're okay?" "Oh, yeah, 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 yeah." And you keep on pressing them, and they're like, "Well, actually, this thing happened," you know.
Yeah.
And I noticed the same thing in my kids because of fear, right? They're afraid or scared to share their feelings, right? They don't want to say anything.
And these fears can come from, generational things. Mom said it that way, grandma said it that way, and they've heard their grandparent and their grandparent learned it from theirs, and there's all this that's just brought down. And sometimes children who are empaths or who are highly sensitive feel that energy beyond the words.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
and that's why it can be very challenging sometimes. So I'd like to ask the listeners, what's one trigger you want to handle better? Maybe you can share that in the chat. And it was such a delight, Craig. Well, I don't know. I can't say your name to get
That's
today.
okay.
It's okay. But thank you for being patient with me. Thank you so much for coming. It was an awesome conversation. And I will see you again, I'm sure, around, and maybe as your daughters grow, or we can do something to support dads even more. That would be great. And if people want to connect with Craig, his information will be in the write up on the Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn, wherever it is that you choose to watch this. So thank you very much. And
Thank you for having me as a guest.
it was my pleasure. Thank you and have a great day. And if you need to book a call, there's my QR code. And just keep doing your best and know that it's good enough right now and it's good enough for another day. And be inquisitive. What is it that I need to adjust in myself? What's that little thing happening inside of me that needs lots of love and compassion? So, see you tomorrow at 1 p.m. and have a great